Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Gather and Go, the podcast that helps you plan, promote, and lead better trips. I'm Brian Jewell. I am your host. I am totally stoked that you decided to spend some of your time with me today. And as always, our promise to you is that we're going to do everything we can to make this investment of your time worth your while. Today, I have a really fascinating conversation for you with Greg Bottenhorn of Jassby. If you do anything in travel, either as a customer or a vendor, a big part of your business involves payments. Greg is a payment guru, and we're going to talk nuts and bolts about travel payments. He's going to tell us how credit card fees impact your travel business. He's going to give us some tips for keeping your money and your customers' money safe on the road. And he's going to give us his insights into payment technology you can leverage to make your trip operations more convenient. That's a conversation you will definitely want to hear. Before we get there, though, let's start with some travel news you may have missed. American hotel business is lagging the overall economy. On a recent episode of Tell Me More, a hospitality data podcast, Jan Freitag of analytics firm CoStar Group said the U.S. travel industry could be facing a potential hotel recession. CoStar data shows that in 2025, growth in revenue per available room has been at the lowest recorded level ever outside of recessionary periods and the 2020 pandemic, averaging only 0.02%. And August of 2025 was the third month in a row when revenue per available room declined by 1% or more. Now, this data is perplexing because while the overall U.S. economy shows stability, the hotel industry seems to be declining in performance. Freitag said, quote, "There is not a recession in sight. And then we are here looking at our data saying growth? What growth?" According to the CoStar data, the top 25 U.S. markets are driving the decline. These major markets had a 3% decline in August compared to 0.4% growth across all other U.S. markets. Well, now it's time for the road tip segment of our show. This is the part of every episode where we dig deep into our bag of travel knowledge from decades on the road and bring you tips to make your next trip less stressful and more successful. Now, if you've spent much time in the tourism industry, maybe gone to a conference or two, or attended a fam tour or something like that, you have probably found yourself with a lot of swag on your hands. Yeah, you know swag. It's the promotional merchandise, the tote bags, the pins, the notebooks, the t-shirts, all the promotional items that destinations and other travel companies hand out at events and when you come to visit. Of course, everybody loves swag, but after a while, you might start asking yourself, what do I do with all this swag? Because it tends to add up to more than most people really need, or dare I say, even want after a few years of attending tourism events. Now, I am going to be honest with you guys. My house is full of tourism swag. If you open my kitchen cabinets, you're going to find glasses with tourism branding on them. You are going to find things in my kitchen tools with branded wooden spoons, all kinds of kitchen implements. I think all of our beach towels have tourism branding on them. A lot of the t-shirts that I wear, especially a lot of the t-shirts my wife wears, have some tourism branding on them. In fact, my 9-year-old son even loves to swipe t-shirts that I bring home from trips and use them as pajamas. And of course, I haven't bought an umbrella in, 20 years, because it seems like I get 1 or 2 tourism branded umbrellas a year just working on the road. So I am no stranger to swag, and I love it as much as the next guy. But here is the truth. There is just too much swag floating around in the tourism world, especially at conferences and especially on FAMs. Let me put it to you this way. How many tote bags does one person really need? Maybe 2? Maybe 3? chances are if you're working in tourism for any length of time, you're going to accumulate a lot more than that. And it can leave you asking, what do I do with all this swag? Well, today's road tip is designed to help you answer that question. I have 4 different ideas for what you can do with the swag, and these are all for legitimate uses. So, number 1, if you get too much swag, the first thing you can do is leave it in the hotel room. I know this might hurt your heart a little bit, especially if you're the kind of person that just hates to see something go to waste. But just because someone gives you something doesn't mean you're obliged to take it home, especially if it's not something that you're going to find useful, especially if you are short on room in your suitcase or carry-on. I have been known to leave a thing or two behind in a hotel room. You don't need to feel bad about that. And, they always say it's the thought that counts. And you can still be grateful to the host that gave you that gift without necessarily having to burden yourself with it on the trip home. Now, if you just can't bring yourself to put it in the trash in the hotel room before you leave, option number 2 is to take it home and then throw it away when you get there. Now, this happens to a lot of swag that I bring home, or certainly have brought home over the years. Very often I bring it home with the best of intentions, thinking that I'm going to use it, or a friend or a coworker or a family member is going to use it. And then after I offer it around, nobody is interested. And so I end up throwing it away. Nothing wrong with that. Again, no obligation to hold on to something that is not useful to you, that takes up space in your house or office, just because someone gave it to you on a trip. Now, how about some more useful applications of the swag you get? Well, one thing you could do is save it and use it at travel preview parties. Yeah, that's right. The events that you might host in your community when you are trying to drum up interest in a trip. Travel swag makes great door prizes for those events. It's even better if it's swag that you got when you were visiting the place that you are planning a group trip to. So let's say you attended a fam with us, maybe to Louisiana. We got a fam to Louisiana coming up next year. You could come back from that Louisiana fam, start planning your Louisiana trip for your group. And then when you hold that travel preview party, give away all the goodies that you get on that fam at the party. It's a great way to drum up interest, to use that swag in a way that helps you sell your trips. And a piece of swag that helps you sell is even more valuable than a piece of swag that you use around your own home. Finally, I have heard from some of you that you like to save the swag and actually bring it on future trips with you and use it as prizes for games that you play on the motor coach. I think this is a super fun and creative way to go. Your attendees, your passengers are going to get a kick out of sticking their hands in the grab bag of swag that you use for prizes. Accumulate enough of it and you can make sure everybody wins. And it's a great way to pass the time as you go down the road on the motor coach. And again, it's a great way to promote future travel opportunities while you are in the middle of your current trip, because there's no time like your current trip to begin selling your next trip. That is your road tip of the week. Now, I mentioned familiarization tours there, and I want to let you know a couple of things before we move on. Number 1, we have some fantastic familiarization tours in the works for 2026. Now, you can apply to attend that Louisiana trip that I mentioned, as well as get news about the other great trips we have coming online next year on our website at grouptravelleader.com/fams. Simply give us your name and email address there, and you will be the first to know when those upcoming trips are announced. And you can also be the first to get your name in for consideration. Another thing I want to tell you about regarding FAMs is that throughout this year, we have been using a software system to manage our FAMs that is brought to us courtesy of our friends at Group Collect. Now, if you don't know Group Collect, they are a travel tech company started by a group travel leader and staffed by people who have worked in tourism. So they really know what they are talking about, what they're doing, and who they are serving. They've created some really easy to use platforms that take a lot of the pain out of organizing group trips. I used the platform extensively to organize the last FAM that we just took with our readers. It was super simple. It made it really easy to keep track of everybody and their information. There were no tech skills required. The Group Collect team helped me set it up. They answered questions I had along the way. Their support staff really is fantastic. They also have a really cool product in the works called Group Collect Ops, which travel planners can use for everything from generating trip quotes and sending RFPs to even paying suppliers online. Now, if you want to learn about how my friends at Group Collect can help you streamline your travel operations, you can just visit groupcollect.com/gatherandgo, fill out a form there to connect with a team member, and they will get you started. Again, that's groupcollect.com/gatherandgo. I'll drop that link in the show notes as well. Reach out to Group Collect today to plan group travel better. Well, it's just about time for us to get into our featured conversation with Greg Bottenhorn. Let me remind you as we do that you can find a wrap up of the most important things Greg had to say in the show notes for this episode. Show notes are the text that appear below the audio player wherever you're listening to this podcast. You can also find the show notes for every episode we have ever done at grouptravelleader.com/podcast. At the end of the interview, I'm also going to do a quick recap of some of those key moments to make sure you don't miss some of the wisdom that Greg had to share for us. I hope you'll stick around to the end of that wrap up, because when we're done there, I want to talk about the intersection of AI and travel, what's going right there, and some of the things that I see going wrong. That's going to be the topic of today's Hot Minute. You won't want to miss it. We'll be right back with Greg Bottenhorn. All right, everybody. My guest today is a longtime sales and marketing professional whose career in financial technology brought him unexpectedly into the tourism industry. Today, he's the Chief Marketing Officer of Jassby, where he develops and promotes tools to help tour companies facilitate cashless travel and improve the trip experience for group leaders, schools, and students. Greg Bottenhorn, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Brian. Good to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. We're going to talk all things payment today. I think a lot of people hear that word cashless, and it may set off some alarm bells in their heads. Why do you think cashless travel is a good thing?
Yeah, look, the alarm bells I think come from our human way of just rejecting change, right? We always have this, well, this is the way we've always done it mentality. I think where it started to shift in travel was when enough of the horror stories pile up, right? I mean, we've all heard them from stories from people walking down the streets in New York City or DC with suitcases of cash, $30,000 plus. People sitting at their dining room tables after just going to cash a $20,000 check and putting, tens and fives in piles and stapling them together and then stuffing envelopes. I had one gentleman tell me a story. In his early days, he used to drive the bus for the tours. And he would put the cash in a paper bag, like a shopping bag, fold it up and put it behind his seat. Well, one day he was running behind and the students got off the bus and he had a quick turnaround and he was cleaning out the bus and he accidentally threw away his paper bag that had all the cash in it. He realized it, 40 minutes later, went back and had to dumpster dive for an hour. Now, thank God he found the bag of money, right? Yeah. But the experience, I'm sure, wasn't great for him. But we're at a point in time. Look, it's 2025, and when we started doing this, it was 2023, and there was really no need to have cash and these problems on trips anymore. So cashless just kind of became the way, and now travelers are getting used to it. I mean, this is a very common thing in travel today, and here we are.
Yeah, here we are. So I want to tell our audience about your story, because you are not the typical travel industry professional. You came at it from a very unusual angle. So give us the brief overview of how you found yourself as a fintech executive all of a sudden working in the travel industry.
Sure. So I guess first of all, I hope it's an industry that I'm in for a long time. I
Yeah.
love it now. But yeah, I did really stumble into it. So look, Jassby is a traditional fintech. We work anywhere where finance, technology, and card issuing kind of comes into play as our area. So we have all sorts of programs that delve into customized portals for money movement and some large branded credit card campaigns and even payment processing, things along those lines. We started to do a lot of work with banks and credit unions, which have their own problems when it comes to reaching the youth market, and that's really our expertise. Um, and a large provider in the tour operator space stumbled across us. They were at a bank that had partnered with us, saw us, and said, we've tried card programs in the past, but for a variety of reasons, traditional card programs just don't work in educational travel. So they reached out to us and said, "Hey, do you want to build something that does work for educational travel?" Just real quick on my background, I'm a passionate traveler. I love to travel. I love to experience new things. I'm also a father of four, and so my kids grew up having those experiences, and I know the power of it in terms of personal education. So I jumped at the opportunity to participate in that industry. We took 6 months, 9 months to build something out and try it out, and we got a lot of feedback initially. This works. This didn't. It'd be really cool if, and all those things. And until we really came up with a solution that checked all the boxes, met the needs of the tour operator and the schools and the travelers and their parents, and then we rolled it out to the rest of the market. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I think most people listening have kind of two sort of core experiences with payment cards. One of them is when I go to the grocery or to the coffee shop, I swipe my card, or these days I may, tap my card, and it's magic, and I don't have to transact any cash, and I might even get like points or airline miles or a little bit of cash back, and it's awesome. My other experience is maybe I am a merchant and I have to take card payments from people. And whenever I take that card payment, I lose a chunk of the revenue as a fee. And that's the opposite of awesome, right? So can you help us understand when a merchant swipes a card, what is happening and what kind of organizations are involved, and how do they end up taking pieces of that transaction?
Sure. It's a great question. So, look, you got to think back to when cards were introduced into our financial world, right? And so at that point, a lot of stores were still cash and even checks, and I probably remember those days. And when cards were introduced, it ended up being a real convenience for stores, because now people who had forgotten their wallet or didn't have cash, or quite honestly couldn't afford a specific purchase and needed credit for it, could very easily access those same goods. So it was an increase in revenue for merchants as well. I would say it still is to this day. With that comes a convenience fee. Look, everybody kind of that's involved needs to make their piece of it. Today, that's called interchange, right? I think it was always called interchange, but it's the amount of money that's charged whenever a card is swiped. So an easy way to think about it is that when you swipe your card at a merchant for a $10 purchase, usually it varies, but let's call it 3% of that purchase becomes the interchange. So the merchant loses that 3%. It's why you see some places charge a fee for if you want to use a card, and people may wonder, well, why is there a fee? It's because it's usually a smaller merchant and they just can't afford to lose that amount of money off of every purchase. The interchange is then split amongst all the parties involved, right? So when I say that, it's not just the merchant and MasterCard, for example, right? MasterCard, Visa, American Express, they're kind of the large brand that's on these cards, and that are behind a lot of this. But then there's lots of partners in between, right? So there's always a bank, an issuing bank that actually is the one responsible for issuing that card. There's a payment processor, right? The person that actually works with everything in the back scenes to make sure that that money goes from one account to another. And then there's generally a program manager that kind of manages the whole thing, right? So all of those players kind of take their piece of that transaction, and that's what the interchange goes to.
Yeah. Is there any difference between those typical interchange fees when you are accepting payments online versus at a terminal in a brick and mortar store?
Sure. So there's lots of different things that impact that interchange amount. Debit card and credit card programs, for example, have different interchange amounts. The type of swipe, the type of merchant can vary there. Quite honestly, it can be the relationship that merchant has set up with their processor. Again, it's none of these things change dramatically the amounts, but it's never just one flat amount industry standard. There's always variances there.
Yeah. So if I'm a small tour operator and I'm, swiping, I don't know, $50,000 a year worth of customer payments, getting an incremental, reduction in fees is not going to be a whole lot more money in my pocket, right? I'd have to be doing $1 million in payments to really see the difference.
First of all, probably, right? I mean, it's certainly you want to have the more volume, the better the return's going to be for you. I would also, though, say that a lot of times those smaller tour operators that may be only doing $50,000, a couple $1,000s makes a big difference to them, right?
Yeah.
Look, we all know the margins in this industry aren't fantastic. So anywhere where you can look to trim costs or to save money, I think is a good thing. The hard part for those merchants is finding a different processor, right? So this is where Stripe kind of comes into the market and payment solutions like that, right? Processors. They really cater to that smaller audience. And the reason why it's harder for that smaller audience to find kind of a bigger player to process their payments is because of the risk involved, right? There's always risk involved when you bring on a new merchant. Because chargebacks, things like that can really hurt your program. And for a lot of big programs, it's just not worth it for that $50,000 charge amount that they're going to get from that vendor. And that's where the Stripes come into the market. Now, with that, you pay a premium, right? It's like anything else. If I'm going to serve your market and there's more risk to me and not many people serve your market, I'm going to charge you more for it. The one thing that I would suggest to people in that boat is to make sure that you're monitoring how your business grows, because at some point you might either outgrow the solution that you're with or actually qualify for a different processor that you might be able to save some money on. So, a couple things to always consider. The other thing, Brian, I think this is important to point out because not many people realize this, especially as you get bigger. I'm a strong advocate of having multiple processors that you process with. You might send 90% to one and 10% to another or some different mix there. The real problem is sometimes processors get into a situation, and sometimes it's their own doing and sometimes it's not, where they're getting more heavily audited or focused on or things like that. And they need to really look at the programs that they have and determine if the risk is worth it. The last thing you want to be if you're a merchant is your processor calls you up one day and says, hey, sorry, we're terminating your program. And now you're stuck and you're scrambling and you have to tell all your customers you can't take their payments. It's never a bad thing to have a couple processors send some of your transactions one way, some transactions another. It's like anything else, just create some redundancy in the process is always good.
So let's talk about that trip abroad. When I go abroad, I hope to be able to pay for anything I need with my US-based card. What is involved in that? Are there additional expenses in that transaction that are not there, when I'm just buying in US dollars here in the US?
Yes. So look, a few things on this. One, there's always risk involved there, right? When you're traveling, tourists are always targeted, and you're always at risk of having information stolen, right? Thieves and hackers and all of these bad actors, right? They've learned to spot the people that are going to have money and cards and things to pay for an experience, right? So I would say that there's some risk there. I would also tell you that a few things. One, if you are going to travel abroad with a card, you always want to let your bank know that you're traveling abroad with that card. Because of what I just said, there's all sorts of security features now in place so that they can spot and really detect and terminate fraud. So you always want to let that bank know that you're traveling. Two, there's often convenience charges that are charged. So if you ever take a trip and you get your bill the next month, look at it. Oftentimes there's a charge, and then below it, it'll say convenience fee $4.95. And it's every time you swipe your card, you're getting hit with a convenience fee, right? Because there are some costs to that bank. There's currency conversions and things like that happen. So there are some costs there. Most banks pass that cost on. There are a lot of programs now that if you have a certain level of service on that program, you can get foreign transaction fees waived. There's also normal currency conversions, right? So if you're traveling in Europe and you're buying something, obviously there's a currency conversion between USD, which is the funds that you use on your existing card, and the funds that you're paying for being the euro, right? One little kind of tip of the trade here. When you're asked, so for anybody that's traveled internationally, you know what this looks like. You swipe your US card and a thing pops up. Then it says, do you want to pay this in euros or do you want to pay it in USD? Always choose the local currency. It's a little bit better in terms of conversion and how that all works. So always choose that as the option there. I think most people just naturally in their minds think, oh, I want to choose the USD because that's what I normally deal in. But always choose the local currency if you're asked.
So yeah, that is a great tip. I think a lot of people aren't aware that they may be paying up to $4 to $5 per swipe on those foreign transactions. Does that make a case for people who are frequent travelers to maybe get one of those cards that are marketed towards frequent travelers, an airline branded card or something else that really puts an emphasis on that? Or are those more likely to waive that kind of fee?
Yeah. So I would say yes, absolutely. Look, credit cards are it's kind of a weird industry, right? Because people see the value that they get from points and point programs and other benefits as worth that fee. And a lot of times, right? There's nothing wrong with feeling that way. My feeling is I'd always rather not. I buy things that I can afford because
right.
One, it's how you save on things like fees and interest, and I believe in earning interest and not paying interest. But also, I think you got to be extremely organized to use specific point programs to make sure you're maximizing it. But yeah, look, for me, because I do travel a lot, I always look for programs that are going to be the best fee schedule for me and my lifestyle. And so for me, it's absolutely not having foreign transaction fees. I also, though, to be honest with you, generally don't bring my US credit cards on trips when I'm traveling internationally. I might bring my debit card where I can protect generally the money that I have, move things around to different accounts and things along those lines. But I generally don't travel with a credit card internationally at all.
Okay, I want to hear more about that because in my mind, my instinct would be almost opposite of that. My instinct is, well, the debit card is tied to my bank account, and if somebody, got this card, they could clean out my bank account versus, the credit is not my money yet. So walk me through the reasoning there.
Yeah. So look, you're correct. A debit card links directly to your bank account or your funds. But what that means is that you can control how much funds are available and accessible via that card, right? So you can keep that amount lower. You can move money every day to that card if you want to do it that way. Look, for me, I've always found that challenging purchases with my bank, who I have a relationship with, has been far easier than when I try to challenge a credit card transaction. Now, this depends on the credit card and the bank that issues it and all of this. But yeah, I would always much rather have that conversation with my local bank than I would with a credit card 1-800 number, right? And the other part I would say to this, though, is that, so look, I'm always on financial risk and risk while traveling. That's just my natural kind of instinct, right? I would tell you that a lot of banks these days, because they have to be competitive, are very good at fraud prevention, at returning funds when they're used. Mostly when I have had these experiences come up, it's been a pretty easy process, but it's always easier with my bank. And I have had some horror stories with credit card companies who, and again, I think we've all probably had it when we challenge credit card charges. Like sometimes they treat you like you're lying to them. And I get it. Probably a lot of times people do lie to them.
Yeah.
But for the honest people, it really feels like you're being interrogated, and then you got to fill out this affidavit, and you need to have it notarized, and it's just a lot of work, and it takes a frustrating situation and makes it even more frustrating.
Yeah.
And usually it's the last thing I need when one of those things happens, where I call the credit card company and I'm told, "Are you sure you didn't use it there? And maybe you were there and you don't remember being there, and now you got to fill out this form and have it stamped 3 times." And for me, it's the last thing I need when I'm that frustrated already.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Now, I want to talk more about the security features in cards. I think a lot of us have been conditioned to believe that credit cards especially offer a lot of security, but we've also all heard the horror stories of the devices that skim people's card information. What is the status on that today? Has the chip card changed that? Are chip cards more secure? Are they less secure somehow? And do we need to be taking extra precautions to keep people from somehow getting our card information when we travel?
Sure. So I'd say chip cards are actually less secure. They're more convenient for sure. But chip cards open you up to, now it's storing data and transacting data and things like that, right? It's chip. So this is where RFID comes in, and RFID is radio frequency identification.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically how contactless works, right? It's essentially technology that uses radio waves to track information and to accept information and things along those lines. With that, there's something called an RFID blocker, right? I am not an expert in RFID blockers, and I've always kind of questioned how well they work, but they do exist. And you can have a wallet that's an RFID blocker. You can have actual sleeves that your cards go into that supposedly block RFID. But yeah, if you have a chip that you're storing and transmitting data electronically, then logic tells us that can be taken by, by a bad actor, right? Who has either a reader where they can take the information right off the card that you're holding, or even in your wallet. This industry is crazy with that these days, because I should be careful of that, but somebody could have a reader that takes all the information out of you, Brian's wallet on your cards, and then I can have cards printed with your name and credit card information on them and just start using them, right?
Wow.
These are the things that need to be careful of. There's lots of financial fraud that goes on these days, specifically with our older people who don't understand technology maybe quite as well. Or this is probably the wrong word to use, but sometimes are a little bit more naive about how many bad people there are in the world, right? But there's financial fraud is a gigantic industry, right? There's just lots of money being stolen and lost, and we do have ways to protect ourselves.
So talk to me about the use case for tour companies. My first instinct, again, if I'm running a tour company, is to tell everybody, hey, bring your own payment method, make your own decisions. Why are tour companies saying, no, we want to provide you a payment method? And what are the benefits to the tour company and to the traveler?
Sure. Let me break this out into 2 buckets, right? Because we have youth and then we have adults, right? So I'll touch on youth first because I think it's easier, right? Mom and dad don't want to send their card with, little Bobby on a trip, because little Bobby has a way of not necessarily being super smart with money, and I don't want to have a card, right?
Right.
So I think that's the biggest reason. When it comes to youth travel, again, I think it's pretty clear and obvious. Either your choices are cash or provide some sort of card option for them. One of the things we didn't talk about earlier, but really comes into play here, is we live in a world today where a lot of stadiums and facilities that have concerts and venues and things like this are cashless these days. You can only use cards there. These are places that tour operators frequent with youth travelers.
Yeah.
So the need for a card really comes into play. And again, mom and dad aren't super psyched about sending theirs along. Adult travel is a little bit different. So we do have a lot of partners that use our program for adult travel. I'll tell you, a lot of it is international, and again, specifically with the senior market, as a means to protect against international fraud on cards. So they'll use our card again. It's a debit card. It's not a credit card. as a means of protecting funds that might otherwise be vulnerable. Right. So that aligned with the fact that we don't charge international fees. So we talked about transaction fees earlier. On our travel program, we don't charge any international swipe fees or really fees of any kind like that. So it's a good tool for international travel. I do have, and I'm actually kind of surprised by this in the adult market. And again, I think it's a lot of seniors, but even I see it now on, when moms all get together and do a girls trip, right? That a tour operator is involved in that and using our card for that, just as a way to offer an all-inclusive option, right? So that,
Mm.
the adult traveler isn't, again, getting back after the trip, looking at their statement without even realizing, wow, I actually spent a lot more money than I realized. Adults want all-inclusive options. And this is a way for the tour operator to do an all-inclusive option, but not require that adult to have pre-planned, prepaid for meals with the entire group. They want to go off and do their own thing. But how am I going to do that in an all-inclusive option if I'm not providing a means of payment for that? We've been getting much more involved in those type of trips as well.
Yeah, that all-inclusive option, man, that deeply resonates with me. Maybe it has to do with getting older and you're already paying for so many things so many times a day anyway. So to not have to do that would be pretty magical.
Yeah, you know what it is too, Brian? It's that, a lot of people have budgets for trips and for travel. Like you put aside, you say, I'm going to spend $5,000 on that trip, right? And again, I know I've done it. You get back from that trip and you start looking, you don't even realize because you know how it is. You're on a trip and you're having fun and you see a price for something and you're like, yeah, we're having fun. And I want, and you swipe your card, but you get back and you find out that $5,000 trip cost you $7,500 because you used
Right.
your card a lot more than you thought. And this is where all inclusive comes in, is you can say, listen, your budget's $5,000. This trip's going to cost you $5,000 all in, right?
Yeah.
Outside of taxes and gratuities,
Yeah.
and it just makes it a lot easier. But if you're going to do that, you have to provide for things like meals.
So for people that want to learn more about Jassby and see if those solutions could be really helpful for their tour companies, what is the best way for them to either find you or find the company, follow you guys online? Give us some directions.
Absolutely. Jassby.com, www.jassby.com. It's right here, but it's Jassby. There's all sorts of things on there where you can see different programs that we offer. When you go to the travel and tour tab, you'll fill out a form if you want to have a conversation. Those actually go directly to me. I always reach out, usually right away. It can take up to a couple days if I'm really busy or if I'm away or something along those lines. But you will always hear back from me. It's never anything that's going to go into a black hole. And I'd love to talk with anybody about our programs.
Yeah, excellent. We will link to that in the show notes for sure. Before I let you go, we have some questions we ask everybody, and these are just for fun. So no pressure. You can just answer off the top of your head. When you book travel, do you choose a window seat or an aisle seat?
Aisle.
Yeah. You got
Always.
a thought process there?
So I drink a lot of coffee and a lot of water, and I need to get up several times throughout a flight. What's funny is that I am strictly aisle, and my wife is strictly window. So usually that's good, and oftentimes we'll have somebody that ends up sitting between us. But she likes to sleep, and I like to get up a lot. So
yeah, makes sense. What's one thing in your carry-on that you wouldn't travel without?
Chargers. I always have chargers. And it's funny, my carry-on bag has like 4 or 5 because in case one doesn't work or
Right.
Wordle's different. I always have lots of chargers and I bring my own water. It's the first thing I buy whenever I get through security. I buy 2 big bottles of water and put them on each side of my backpack.
Yeah, and I feel that. I think I have chargers in my bag that I no longer own the devices that belong to them.
Me too. Absolutely.
Yeah. If you had a free airline pass and a week with nothing else to do, where would you be headed next?
Oh God, that's almost an impossible question to answer. I love to travel. So look, one of my dream destinations that I've never been is Fiji. It's probably a little longer than a week. Maybe it's 10 days, maybe it's 2 weeks. But that's one place that I've never been, and I've been to a lot. But that's an absolute dream. I have to do that trip.
Yeah, that does sound amazing. The last question is, what is one thing you have seen or done on the road that you wish you could go back and experience again with somebody you love?
Oh gosh. Wow. That's a great question. So I This is actually a little story to this. It's probably a longer answer than what most people give here. So a few years ago, actually probably 7 or 8 years ago now, I had the opportunity to do a domestic road trip with my kids. So I've got 4 kids. They were still young enough at the time where they were interested in doing this. But we did a 6-week, 10,000-mile road trip around the U.S. Over a summer. It was amazing. We didn't get a Winnebago or anything. My oldest son stayed home, so it was 5 of us. But we did it in a minivan. We never spent more than 4 hours in any given day in the car. Wow. And we experienced everything that this country has to offer. And it was an amazing experience, an eye-opening experience. A great family experience. So I would choose that. Just to follow up on that, though, we enjoyed it so much. The next year we did something similar in Europe, not for 6 weeks. We did 3.5 weeks, and where we did a lot of travel around Europe as well. Also awesome, like being at the Colosseum in Rome with my kids and seeing them experience things that they had learned about in school is truly something I hope everybody with kids has an opportunity to do at some point. It doesn't have to be that specific destination, but anywhere where you can see the gears turning in their head because they learned about this and now they're sitting there looking at it is really amazing. So kind of a combination there. I know it's a long answer, but both of those experiences were truly amazing.
That is amazing. I'm so glad you got to share that with your kids. And hey, that is the beauty of student travel. So
absolutely. Amen.
Yeah, couldn't say it any better. Greg, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciated it.
Well, I sure hope you enjoyed that conversation with Greg as much as I did. And as is often the case, Greg had so much good stuff to say that our interview actually went longer than I have space to share with you here on the podcast. But you can hear the entire thing over on our YouTube channel. Yeah, just go to YouTube, search for Gather and Go, and you can find the video that way. You can also find it embedded in the episode page for this episode at grouptravelleader.com/podcast. When you watch that full interview on YouTube, you are going to hear Greg discussing whether you can and whether you should charge credit card convenience fees for your tours. He's going to talk about the technique identity thieves used to slowly bleed you dry after they steal your card data. And he's going to give us his insights on the future of payment technology, things like mobile technology, AI, and more. All fascinating stuff. Go check it out right now on YouTube. Now, before we move on, I want to recap a few of the most important things Greg had to say to make sure you don't miss them. When we were discussing credit card fees and how they impact small businesses, Greg said that fees can really cut into the margins of a small business and that you should do anything you can to look for savings. But he said the hard part is finding a different processor. And this is where payment processors like Stripe come into the picture. They really cater to that small audience, but with that, you pay a premium. He also said you should make sure you're monitoring how your business grows. At some point, you might outgrow the solution you're with or outgrow your processor. And he said, as you get bigger, I'm a strong advocate of having multiple processors. It's never a bad thing to have a couple of processors. Creating some redundancy in the process is always good. I think this is some really great insight from Greg at every level of growth. Stripe is a fantastic solution. I have used it before. It's basically plug and play, allows you to take payments on your website with virtually no coding. I also think it's really insightful for Greg to say, as you grow, you can look at different solutions because more volume in sales is going to get you better processing fees from your credit card processor. So every couple of years, it's worth looking at your credit card revenue, looking at your volume, and shopping around to see if there's a processor that can serve you and help you save some cash. Because if you save a few cents or a couple bucks on every transaction and you're doing enough transactions per year, that's a real impact on your bottom line. And we can all use as much of that as we can get. Next, when we were talking about the difference between debit cards and credit cards, Greg said a debit card links directly to your funds, but that means you can control how many funds are accessible via that card. You can keep that amount lower or move money to that card every day. And he said, I've always found that challenging purchases with my bank, who I have a relationship with, has been far easier than when I try to challenge a credit card transaction. I would much rather have that conversation with my local bank than a credit card 800 number. This is an insight that really surprised me. I'll be honest, when I travel, especially internationally, I tend to put everything on an Amex on a business card and just trust that if something goes wrong, Amex is going to help me figure it out. And maybe I've just been fortunate that not much has gone wrong in my time on the road. I haven't had my card stolen. I haven't lost my card. I haven't had my identity stolen. But statistics tell us that that is going to happen to somebody sooner or later. And so I really like this philosophy. Number one, if you're using a debit card, you can only have enough money in the account to pay the expenses that you expect to put on the card for that trip, or even manage it day by day. And number two, if something goes wrong, if there is fraud on your debit card, hopefully you do have that great relationship with your local bank and they can take care of it for you instead of sending you down a nightmare labyrinth of voice prompts and AI agents and machines that you have to talk to try to get through to a real person from a major credit card company. I thought that was really insightful. Finally, when we were talking about the use cases of prepaid cards on tours, Greg said that obviously there's a lot of applications for student trips when parents don't want to send their students with a bunch of cash. But he also said, we have a lot of partners who use our program for adult travel. He said a lot of it is international for the senior market. They use our debit card as a means of protecting funds that might otherwise be vulnerable. He also said in the adult market, I'm even seeing it now when moms get together and take a girls' trip as a way to offer an all-inclusive option. So the traveler isn't getting back from their trip and seeing their statement and saying, I spent a lot more money than I realized. He said adults want all-inclusive options, and this is a way for the tour operator to do that without having pre-planned prepaid meals. Now, this is an idea that really resonated with me. I can totally relate to that desire to pay for a trip once and then basically have everything included once I go on it. I love not having to reach into my pocket, pull out my wallet every single time I go for a meal. I also love this idea of not making every group meal be something where everybody eats together, eats off a limited menu, has a limited amount of time. So I think this is a really ingenious solution to be able to offer that all-inclusive experience and also offer the flexibility that so many travelers are looking for on trips today. Great ideas here from Greg Bottenhorn. Well, if you've been paying attention to the news, paying attention to thought leaders in the travel industry, you have probably been reading and hearing and maybe even thinking a lot about artificial intelligence. Of course, it is an exciting time in the world with artificial intelligence growing so quickly and seeming to offer so many possibilities. And there are definitely people in travel who are excited about those possibilities and painting a very rosy picture of the future. Well, as I look at that and think about what is going on, I think it's worth asking ourselves, is AI getting travel right? That is going to be the topic of today's Hot Minute. Yeah, that's right. The Hot Minute is the portion of the program where I take 60 seconds to give you my unfiltered views on an issue that impacts tourism every day. And today we're asking whether AI really understands the business of travel. So let's put 60 seconds on the clock and get into it. There is a lot of excitement about the possibilities of AI in the travel industry, but so far, I'm not convinced that AI is getting travel right. We have been hearing reports, for instance, about ChatGPT sending travelers to places that don't actually exist. And now a new AI app developed by a Facebook programmer helps people create selfies from trips they didn't actually take. Now, these are terrible uses of AI. The former is sloppy, and the latter is just plain stupid. What our industry needs is AI that allows hardworking travel professionals to extend their productivity and serve more people. And we also need to develop small business tools that will interface with AI agents to help people book actual trips. Until that happens, I'm not worried about AI taking anyone's job in travel. Well, that's the Hot Minute. That's how I see things anyway. Of course, as always, you are welcome to disagree, and we can still be friends. And hey, whether you agree or disagree, we would love to hear from you. You can send your thoughts, questions, or your devastating takedowns of our digital overlords to podcast@grouptravelleader.com. I read every email that comes into that address. I really do love hearing what you have to say. And hey, you never know. Your thoughts or ideas might just be the topic of the next Hot Minute. And while you're in the mood to give us some feedback, would you do me a big favor? Would you go to your favorite podcast playing app? And if you haven't already followed the show, then do it while you're there. And if you could also give us a rating and leave us a review, that would be a big help. I'm so thankful to everyone who has done that so far. My thanks as well to Greg Bottenhorn for joining us today. On the next episode, I'm going to bring you a really interesting conversation with Ryan Kramer of Group Collect, who's going to give us his tips for making sure your team is effective in working from anywhere in the world. That's a conversation you won't want to miss. In the meantime, remember this. At the end of the day, we're all on this trip together, so let's make it a good one. See you next time on Gather and Go. Gather and Go is hosted and executive produced by me, Brian Schul. Our publisher is Mac Lacey. Our creative team includes Danya Simmons, Ashley Ricks, and Rachel Crick. Our sales team is Talisa Reck and Ashley DeLucia. To advertise on the podcast, call Talisa at 859-253-0455. Gather and Go is a production of the Group Travel Leader. For more information on our podcast, magazines, and events, visit us online at grouptravelleader.com.